Hello, this is Nice Wander, Dan Nowman Nice Wander, and you are watching the Nowman Show, and this is part two of a two-part series on worker-owned cooperatives, which are workers owning their own businesses together, whether they are small or large, and they're run by one person, one vote, and it's a democratic process. And so we're continuing in more detail on what we began in episode 1, talking to Liz and to Patrick. So real briefly, again, just give a short little overview of your backgrounds, and then we'll continue the conversation in much more detail about worker-owned cooperatives and what's going on in Los Angeles and beyond. First, Liz Ryder. Hello, Liz. How are you?
I'm doing good.
Excellent.
Yeah, Liz Ryder. Let's say I've been an activist in, human rights activist, environmental activist, all those sorts of things. A community organizer, political organizer, all of my life. But for the last 3 decades, over the course of the last 3 decades, I've been working for organized labor. So I've been working in the labor movement. And so consequently, when it comes to the worker cooperative community, what I've been working on mostly is the relationship between organized labor and the worker cooperative community. Founder of one of the founders of the Union Co-op Council, the U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives, founder of the Los Angeles Union Cooperative Initiative, founder of the WORCS, Worker Ownership Resources and Cooperative Services, which I'm working with Patrick Conlon to develop, and he can talk about that work as well.
Thank you very much, Liz. And Patrick.
Yeah, hi, my name is Patrick. I'm the Director of Development of WORCS, Worker Ownership Resources and Cooperative Services. And we are a worker cooperative developer, based in the American Southwest. And yeah, I have a background in business. I've owned bars and I've owned, mobile bartending services and things like that. And I was also the son of an entrepreneur who owned an alarm business for about 30 years and learned a lot from him as well. Yeah.
Excellent. So you have a lot of background, and both of you have a lot of background in labor and in business and even worker cooperatives. So this is a very exciting topic as a solution for the numerous problems that are facing us at this juncture in our history. We talked in the last episode about the work of WORCS, Patrick. And you had mentioned also about the various different projects that you were working on, including a thrift store, a bookstore. And could you go in a little more detail about what it is that these projects are hoping to achieve, and a little more detail about what they are?
Sure. All right. So the first one is Mutuals. Mutuals is like a thrift store. Just think of like Goodwill, Salvation Army. The thrift stores that, are around, owned by a nonprofit organization. The difference is we're going to have a worker self-directed enterprise one, so the workers themselves are the board of directors. The objective of this is to raise capital for worker cooperatives. Now, that's one of the biggest problems with worker cooperatives around the country is they lack capitalization, more so than even businesses, which also regular businesses that also lack capitalization, but worker cooperatives even more so, because if they go to a bank, and I've heard numerous stories from, worker cooperatives that the bank won't take them seriously. They don't know what they are. They think this is funny, or, it's kind of, they have a lot of weird negative experiences. So we're hoping to, find ways to do that. And since Salvation Army and Goodwill are funding their projects with, thrift operations, why can't we do it and do it our way? So that's what Mutuals is about. And, once that gets off the ground, we'll start looking into, branching off and, starting in other parts of the country to kind of have as the anchor of works in each community. So, so that's Mutuals. In Las Vegas, Liz founded the Las Vegas chapter when she lived out there. She was reassigned out there with her a union job she had, and she organized works out there with a cohort. And Liz moved back to LA in the last few years, but there still is a lot of cooperative energy. So I have been slowly reorganizing from a distance, and I've gone out there too to talk and meet with them and to help them decide on a business, and they've decided on organizing like a used bookstore. And used bookstores are, they're pretty easy to set up. It's a fun business. And, I have some, a little bit of background, in doing used books. So I do understand how, how that business works. So yeah, we're, that's still in the beginning phases, but there is a board of directors that we have established. They're meeting regularly. Yeah. And let's see.
Is that a thrift store also, or is it just a bookstore?
Just a bookstore,
Just a
used
bookstore?
The way the worker owners are talking about it, though, they may want to have it, more than a bookstore, but, used bookstores are very viable. I mean, there was a ton here in California, and the only reason why they're gone now is because the rents have been raised dramatically. Like there was one even in the Laguna Hills Mall that the guy was selling it only not because he wanted to sell it. I mean, he was doing 20 to 30 grand a month in this place. He's like, yeah, I don't even care about this place. I just keep the doors open and have someone run it, someone run the register. And like, I don't care at all about it. I mean, literally he's bragging about not caring about this place, and he's like making gangbusters. But the reason why he had to leave was because the mall was renovating. They were putting like marble floors in there because they wanted to attract like bigger vendors like Macy's and some of these others. So they rents. And what happened is that's literally every bookstore story, that used bookstore. But Las Vegas has cheap rents. I mean, at least compared to California. So it's like the best place in the country to start a used bookstore because the rents are so low in a lot of places. And there's still a need. People still, I mean, going into a used bookstore, I mean, I've been in them and you're like $10 for 10 books. Wow. So they also want to sell coffee. And I told them we're talking about, putting wheels on shelves so we can make it a multi-purpose room for, bands and DJs or other stuff, to have it as a community center as well. And online, and getting a school bus packing it full of books. So we can go to low-income schools, instead of having scholastic books, try to rip off a school of people that may not be able to afford it. For $5, you can get 5 books. And if they're children's books, you put them in a school bus so they can go and shop for it. It's, it's a lot of value, so.
That's fantastic. So you also have you were talking about in the first part about a micro funding.
Yes. Okay, so we have a micro donation fund, and pretty much the purpose of this, because a lot of nonprofits do have a micro, they get micro donations on a monthly basis. They're called sustainers. We're not using it for sustainers. What we're doing is we're trying to create a capital fund. So we have about 50 contributors now, and the whole point of this is for a few reasons: for either microfinancing. Worker cooperatives, if they need a capital expenditure, a piece of equipment for 5 or 10 grand or a little bit more, for a piece of equipment to expand, so they don't hit a wall, in their expansion. We want them to succeed. Other things could be leveraging for a bigger loan. So think like, if we're getting up to $5,000 a month, that'd be pretty easy to negotiate 60 grand, $60,000 loan or $100,000 loan. Because you're going to go to a bank, the bank's going to ask, why would I give you this loan? And be like, look, I have a track record of having this amount of money coming in and not having any liability as well. And so even if, we throw the money away, we can still pay it back. Let's just say it's going to be, it's an easy sell for a bank, for that. Yeah. And also for trainings as well. For instance, like the Arizmendi, Arizmendi and a few other places, they charge a certain amount, to train, for administrative operations, for, like what it is to be a co-op, and also, just banking in general. Instead of, having a few people, front the money for the cost of training, this micro donation fund, if you pitch into it, you get all this training for a lot less. It's like,
and for those who may not know, Arizmendi, I'm wearing a shirt here. Arizmendi is a worker cooperative bakery, pizzeria. There are 7 of them in the Bay Area. And I went to 2 of them when I visited there in November, one in Oakland and one in San Francisco, I believe on 6th Street in San Francisco. And it's all worker owned. They sell pastry, they sell pizza, they also sell coffee, and there's some other items as well, t-shirts, obviously, mugs. And it's like, say, 100% worker owned. Well, there's interest to bring them to Los Angeles, and the Democratic Socialists of America, Los Angeles, has a working group with Liz Ryder. And Liz, can you tell us some more about this ongoing project?
Well, as a part of WORCS, we want to develop a group, a cadre of people who are interested in supporting worker cooperatives. So this particular study group was started, we created a subcommittee of the DSA Labor Committee, because again, this is a labor issue. And we have started a study group. And in this study group, over 100 people are signed up, but not everybody makes it to every meeting, of course. But the idea was to read a lot of literature, but everybody, when the pandemic hit, they're more anxious to get started. Let's get started. And so I offered as you want both theory and praxis, right? So I offered a project because in my experience as developing worker cooperatives in Los Angeles, looking at the Arizmendi model, they have 30 years worth of success, successfully bringing about worker cooperatives and sustaining them. So it's just one of the most effective development models that I've seen in the country. And I said, well, look, why don't we invite them down to do the trainings, to share their development model, guide us through this process. Downtown Crenshaw, which we discussed before, had been asking for our assistance to develop worker cooperatives in the Crenshaw Mall. So it's a very hands-on concept, a practical application, not just theory. And we proceeded to, start working with the Arizmendi group, who's come on to our Zoom calls and invited us to their Zoom calls for training, as well as they've invited some personnel from our group to go to the Bay Area and actually work in their bakeries as part of the, very practical hands-on baking training, as well as, how to run a business and how to, operate cooperatively. So they are offering up their training program and their support, even to the point of perhaps we will actually incur some financial support from the Arizmendi group and become part of their model in the Bay Area. So they started with something called the Cheese Board way back in the 70s. And then they formed the Arizmendi Association of Cooperatives, which is sort of a hub in a network, and so that the bakeries are all tied together by this hub of the development group called the Arizmendi Association of Cooperatives. And each of the bakeries has a representative that is on the board of that central hub, the Arizmendi Association of Cooperatives. And it's that Arizmendi Association of Cooperatives that is going to assist us in creating that same ecosystem in Los Angeles. So there'll be ongoing support for whatever worker cooperatives that we incubate and develop. It's a long-term strategy. Building worker cooperatives, it's like buying your own home. You buy the home and then you pay it off for 30 years. So you don't own that home until that 30 years has gone by and you've made payments on a regular basis, and then you have true ownership. The same thing with the worker cooperatives. It takes a long time to you have to pay off the debt of your initial setup of the business and work over time. So the cooperative movement is not a fast, fix it, Band-Aid sort of methodology. It's a slow, patient methodology, but it does return control to the workers, to the people on a permanent basis, not a temporary basis.
You have a presentation that you are going to present, Liz, to a group, to the labor movements. You want to share that with us?
Sure.
Okay.
Now, so let me preface this with a couple of things. One is that, thus far, when people come to the labor movement, they usually go to the national office. There's the national office, there's state offices, but there's also what they call locals, right? Which is in your local community, labor union locals. And the education, and the message needs to be brought to that local level. So the Union Co-op Council in Los Angeles Union Cooperative Initiative has been working on this concept of getting an education program, an outreach program to labor union locals, rather than just going to the national office and expecting the overburdened staff of the labor movement to carry that message down to the local unions themselves. We are going to engage at the local union level. So this presentation was designed for the LA County Fed. But it's a pilot program that we will be taking on the road to other county federations of labor, which again, addressing union locals around the country.
Welcome to the presentation on worker ownership by LUCI, the Los Angeles Union Cooperative Initiative. Worker cooperatives, growing the labor movement.
LUCI, Los Angeles Union Cooperative Initiative, is a group of Los Angeles area union officers, staff, and members that works at the intersection of worker cooperatives and labor unions. Our mission statement is, the Los Angeles Union Cooperative Initiative is building bridges between worker cooperatives and organized labor in Southern California, promoting sovereignty of labor and subordination of capital by harnessing the power of collective action to democratize enterprise. We are part of a national movement. The national movement for union worker cooperatives includes many major unions, universities, union worker cooperatives around the country, and worker cooperative support organizations such as the U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives, the Union Co-op Council, which is a member council of the U.S. Federation, also Co-op Cincy, LUCI, Mondragon USA, and oneworkeronevote.org. A worker cooperative is any business democratically owned, operated, and controlled by the workers. One worker, one vote, one share. Worker cooperatives come in all sizes, from small with just several members to large with approximately 2,000 members, as in the SEIU unit, Cooperative Home Care Associates, based in the Bronx. Mondragon in the Basque region of Spain has about 80,000 worker owners in a network of 250 worker cooperatives. Why are worker cooperatives important to the labor movement? Unions get better wages, working conditions, and benefits for workers by creating workplace democracy.
Not all employee ownership is fully democratic. An ESOP is an employee stock ownership plan, and there are over 6,000 ESOPs nationwide. But the share of ownership is determined by salary, so ownership and control are unequal. A worker cooperative is structured as one worker, one vote, one share, and no one can own more than one share, so ownership and control remain democratic. Workers and unions are facing a changing landscape of work. Gig economy, contingent and precarious employment such as seasonals, part-times, and temporaries, the effects of COVID-19 pandemic, including closures, remote work, childcare challenges, and health and safety concerns. In response, worker cooperatives are being organized for childcare, transportation and delivery, home care workers, and taxi drivers. And these should be union worker cooperatives. In addition to all of these pressures, the demographics of business ownership are changing. The city of Los Angeles estimates that 10,000 small businesses in the LA area will either have a change of ownership or close due to baby boomers retiring. They call it the silver tsunami. Combined with the pandemic, we face dramatic changes in small business ownership that directly impacts union membership. Worker cooperatives are an advantage to unions because they save union jobs by lessening the impact on our members of changes in ownership. Converting existing bargaining units into unionized worker cooperatives reduces costs to unions for contract campaigns. Organizing unorganized workers into worker cooperatives does not require costly and adversarial election campaigns. Growing union membership adds members to our health and safety funds, preserving hard-won pensions and health plans.
LUCI is bringing experts from around the country to educate local labor unions on topics that include the basics as well as everything you need to know about ESOPs, writing your first right of refusal language into contracts to facilitate worker buyout of transitioning businesses, funding sources for buyouts and incubations of new business, democratic decision-making in a workplace, among other topics. How can your union participate? Sign up for workshops. Become a member of the County Fed Task Force on Worker Ownership. Make presentations to your local union rank and file about worker cooperatives and support the work of LUCI. Sign up now. Make sure you have representatives from your local attend the educational events and become part of the task force on worker ownership.
That's basically the presentation you're going to be giving to hundreds of union representatives, right? The potential of exposing that to thousands of LA area residents is pretty amazing.
Just so you know, there are 15 million members of unions around the country. And like I said, that audience is the audience which is the most receptive to these concepts. It solves labor problems. It provides, income for working people. It has 100% workplace democracy. So this is the most fertile, population sector in the U.S. population.
So there's two different crises simultaneously, and something like 1/3 of the economy has just disappeared.
Not only do we have a silver tsunami, but then now we have the pandemic, which so many businesses have closed. So, if we want to make our lives better, we're just going to have to do it for ourselves.
Just like Father Arizmendi did in the 1950s and created Mondragon. Yeah. And of course, what a great inspiration that was, obviously, for the Arizmendi Association of Cooperatives in the Bay Area, San Francisco and Oakland. And it's really long overdue. We need to take charge of our own lives 100% and stop thinking that we have to go to work for somebody else. Why are we even thinking like that?
In a community, let's say you have a bunch of young people that are entrepreneurs, okay? But the only jobs which are available to them now, I call them MIC jobs. So you have your young entrepreneurs, all they have available to them for jobs, are these very low wage jobs. Walmart and all these big box stores, they put the small mom and pop businesses out of business, the small entrepreneurs. And so what happens is you spend your money at the big box store, but they only pay you the absolute minimum. You can't even you can't afford the housing in Los Angeles. So what's happening is the wealth is being sucked out of our communities. Now, the worker cooperative movement we have seen demonstrated around the world is that the wealth then recirculates within the community. The taxes get paid within the local tax pool. And so consequently, social programs are easier to fund in their local community, as well as the wealth just recirculates locally rather than being extracted by the corporate model.
And that's fantastic. And thank you so much for sharing that. Let's have some closing statements here. First of all, we'll start with Patrick.
Yeah, I mean, Liz did a really good job covering it. I kind of want to just at her last statements on economics. I mean, in Economics 101 course, it's called the circular flow of money that they teach. That's just like this circular diagram with like a bank in the middle, and it shows you how money circulates through the economy. And they don't really accurately. I think they kind of misrepresent what our circular flow of money is in our country, because when you have box stores, there's no circular flow. It's a siphon. It gets siphoned out and it goes to the headquarters, or it goes to where the shareholders are, or it doesn't get redistributed back in the economy. And as a result, what happens is there's no what are called multiplier effects. Multiplier effects is, if I spend $1 here, will that dollar turn into like $1.5 or $1.75, because it's kind of like a snowball effect within the economy. Because what happens, you spend money at the local mom and pop, he goes out and he works with a local vendor, and that, to hire, like to get new windows or something like that, or new products, or, and that person goes and, it pretty much just funnels around the community, where you have a lot less of that. At least profits, for instance, do not go circulate into the local community, where maybe some does, but not much.
They don't pay their taxes into the local community either.
Except for maybe sales tax, maybe property tax. But yeah, you're right. There's no federal tax, income tax. There's a lot of state taxes they're getting, because they incorporate it in Delaware, or they incorporate it in Nevada, or they incorporate. So yeah,
Grand Command.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of incentive for not paying into the local community, where, there's less incentive, for, work co-op, for instance. But yeah, the circular flow of money is radically different, with worker cooperatives, if you had a worker cooperative community, opposed to what we have now. So.
Exactly. And last I saw in 2020, the last statistic I saw, because of the pandemic and the economic crisis simultaneously, about 90,000 businesses, small businesses, are now gone. So there's bound to be a lot more in 2021 going forward until we can actually make some changes ourselves, demand some changes in the short term, and create changes in the long term. So
it's going to take years to understand what happened in 2020.
You're right. You're absolutely
It's bad.
right.
We don't even understand the full extent of it, to be honest with you. So a lot of economists say we're not going to understand until the economy gets revived, you know.
And
So,
that is
Well,
up in the air.
Well, and then we're going to run up against the environmental collapse. By 2050, of course, environmental resources are going to be, fully at their peak. So
When I talked to Howie Hawkins, he was one of the people that worked on the original Green New Deal in 2007, and then he got together again with some of the same people, and they kind of reworked it, rebudgeted it and all that for, in 2019. So instead of going from 2010 to 2020, which was kind of the original idea, now it's 2020 to 2030, but it's going to cost like $27 trillion to do it right. Because he said Bernie Sanders' plan, not AOC's, but Bernie Sanders' plan for the 0% emissions and the Economic Bill of Rights, which worker cooperatives are a part of, in the next 10 years, that makes sense. But he said his long-term plan on transitioning the infrastructure to 2050. I'm sorry, 2050. That's just too long. It's too long. It needs to be everything needs to be 2030, and that means more trillions of dollars. But this is one of the reasons why we need an economic-based movement, in my view, to put pressure on the need for these short-term solutions, and then we can all work together on creating the long-term solutions. Like that's what we're talking about when we talk about worker cooperatives. Well, Liz,
I would like to direct people to our website, which is works, WORCS, USA.org. If you're in the labor movement, please go to LUCI.coop and register with us, because we want to build our presence within the labor movement. And the proceeds from shopcoop.coop will go to support the work of creating worker cooperatives, will go to WORCS, the nonprofit, to create more worker cooperatives in our economy.
So Liz, you also have a study group now. This is with Democratic Socialists of Los Angeles?
Democratic Socialists of America, Los Angeles chapter. We're a subcommittee of the DSA-LA Labor Committee, and we are working specifically on, of course, educating DSA members on worker cooperatives, but also to bring an Arizmendi bakery to Los Angeles and recreate the ecosystem of the Arizmendi bakeries that exist in the Bay Area, bring that whole ecosystem to Los Angeles and nurture it here.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Patrick Conlon and Liz Ryder. It's been awesome, and I hope that you've learned a lot and that you'll take action, because it's up to us, folks. It always is, but especially now. And speaking of now, thank you for watching the Nowman Show, and always remember to stay in the present moment, always.